دائم الابتسام، وكان يعمل راعيا للماشية. لقد علمني أن الغذاء هو سبيل السعادة.
Porque los caminos que recorremos se entrelazan, dando vida a una infinita variedad de historias.
Les poissons que je pêche chaque jour, on ne les trouve que dans ces eaux.
我们提供粮食，滋养生命。
E noi dobbiamo nutrire il mondo.
It's time to take action.
We all have a role to play.
Давайте добьемся лучшего в жизни и в обществе повсюду.
We need a food system that sustains lives, the planet, and protects its workers.
لأن مصيرنا واحد، أفعالنا هي مستقبلنا.
World Food Day really happens under unprecedented circumstances in the middle of a pandemic. It's also FAO's 75th anniversary. It's also 10 years before the SDGs are to be achieved. So we are actually in a really unique point of time. But without further ado, let me introduce the first segment of today's commemoration. We will hear the inaugural FAO North America World Food Day lecture featuring Homi Kharas, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution, followed by some remarks or reactions from our ambassadors and Deputy Director General. So Homi Kharas is Senior Fellow in the Global Economy and Development Program at Brookings. In his capacity, he studies policies and trends influencing developing countries, including aid to poor countries, the emergence of the middle class, global governance, and the G20. He previously served as interim vice president and director of the Global Economy and Development Program. He has published articles, books, opinion pieces on global development policy, global trends, global food crisis, international organization, and private philanthropy. Thank you for being with us, Homi, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Florian, and thank you, Vinlendra, for the great honor of inviting me to give a few remarks. I wanted to just start by congratulating you and FAO on 75 years. 75 years is a long time of extraordinary work and progress. The program that you've put together that mixes the idea that we have to understand the personal experiences with hunger, along with the very sound technical work that FAO has always been famous for pursuing. I think it's that mixture that makes FAO such a unique organization and such a powerful organization. And actually what I would like to do this morning is to talk a little bit about a new and very powerful metric that FAO has been developing called the Food Insecurity Experience Scale. And the key feature of this is that it is a metric that thinks about food insecurity from the perspective of people, not from the perspective of some kind of a macro aggregate. And in my view, this is a very important advance in how we think about hunger and food security. So with your permission, I'm going to share a very short PowerPoint to talk a little bit more about these issues. So if you just bear with me, I will quickly share my screen. And move quickly. So, of course, the big news in terms of food is that finally the world has recognized that food is actually the best vaccine against chaos, and this has been an agenda that's been pursued by so many organizations over such a long time. The World Food Programme has been recognized by the Nobel Committee for the Peace Prize. I think it's fair to say that this is really a powerful statement that says that finally the international community is starting to understand that food is actually one of the principal issues and challenges that we have to deal with. And so I think it's really good news for all the agencies and institutions working on food that there is this recognition of the importance of the issue. Of course, the really bad news is that it's taken a catastrophe of quite epic proportions to get this kind of attention, and the attention is being focused on the symptoms, on the real potential that maybe we face the risk of really severe famine in certain countries, and that is that's the focus. And of course, the World Food Programme tries to deal with those symptoms, but ultimately, what we really are trying to achieve is to address the root causes of what is creating this kind of hunger and food insecurity, and that's where agencies like FAO really come into play. So it may not be right in the kind of the headline of the famines, but it is fundamentally the potential solution to these kinds of issues. And as Bimlendra said, I mean, unfortunately, we have a situation now where hunger is on the rise. There have been frequent reports. The state of food insecurity that FAO, along with the other agencies, puts out every year, constantly has been showing a tendency for food insecurity to be rising ever since 2014. The latest numbers shows that severe food insecurity, according to the FIES scale, now affects more than 750 million people. And moderate to severe food insecurity, which is actually the indicator that is being used for the official SDG 2 target to eradicate food insecurity, the numbers for that are upwards of 2 billion people. And that, I feel, is a number that is not really in people's mind. I mean, when most people think about food insecurity, they're literally thinking about people with severe food insecurity who might be in danger of starving to death. Of course, that's a massive problem, but it shouldn't detract from the fact that we also have problems of this much larger number of people facing moderate food insecurity, which has, in some cases, permanent impact, especially when it applies to children. We all know the implications of stunting for children, but even has other impacts in the way in which people behave. And one of the great things that FAO has been able to do with this new metric is to demonstrate that this is not just a problem for developing countries, that even people in rich countries suffer from moderate food insecurity. And according to these metrics and calculations, that could be in double digits in places like the United States of America, I mean, one of the richest countries in the world. It could be in 5% in Spain and Italy, 2 to 3% in Germany. These are not insignificant numbers. So the universality of food as an issue is really something that is being highlighted. I want to just quickly say that now that the FIES is available, if we want to look into the future and say, what is likely to happen to food insecurity and what can we do about it, we have to start to take a much more sophisticated modeling approach. And I'm associated with a small nonprofit organization called the World Data Lab. We have a team. Professor Matt Cooper is leading the work on this. And one of the things we've been able to do in collaboration with FAO is to use the FAO data, which is for 77 countries, which has explicit food insecurity metrics at the subnational level for 77 countries, and model that and use that so that we're then able to make some kind of inferences about how food insecurity might persist in other places where the data are not yet available, and we're able to make some inferences about what might happen in terms of the future based on some of the big drivers. You know, by using these kinds of techniques, we actually believe that it may be the case that the SOFI is still underestimating the extent of food insecurity in the world. And, you know, rather than the 2 billion figure, it could be as high as 2.3 billion people who are suffering from food insecurity. On the other hand, this kind of modeling also suggests that as income levels in the world improve, and hopefully after COVID, the numbers could start to fall. So I think it demonstrates a couple of things. It demonstrates that the impact of COVID, as I think many of us know, is likely to be quite dramatic in terms of the collapse in incomes as well as what's happening. But as growth recovers, as nutrition starts to improve, by 2030, the numbers could start to fall, but it will be very slow under current trajectories. And when we look ahead to 2030, we still see that there is likely to be 500 million people facing severe food insecurity and 2 billion people facing moderate to severe food insecurity. That is just not the pace that is going to be commensurate with us being able to say anything about success with achievement with SDG 2. So I think that's the real challenge and the push. So I don't want to spend too much time, but just to let you know what goes into these kinds of models, we can use more sophisticated econometric techniques now. We use something called a random forest model. We use economic variables, climate, trade, human capital, health, sanitation, etc. variables. Some of these can be updated to take into account COVID. And all of that goes into then basically being able to come out with something that says, we can actually now start to think a little bit more seriously about what are the kinds of things that drive food insecurity. And obviously poverty is something that drives food insecurity. Stunting at an earlier stage is something that then has longer term consequences for food insecurity once you reach adulthood, income levels per capita, inequality, etc. These are the big drivers. And then you see a number of other things that are also associated with food insecurity, but which, to be honest, have a much smaller impact, including things like climate, precipitation, and even mortality and water scarcity. So we're starting to understand, I think, a little bit more what some of these drivers might be, and that gives us some sense about how, at the subnational level, we might approach food insecurity. Just to give you a quick overview of the regional pattern, what you see is that in panel A, this left-hand side panel, you see the moderate to severe food insecurity by world region. You see sub-Saharan Africa. I think many people would understand and think, yes, we know that there's food insecurity in sub-Saharan Africa, but look at how many people in South Asia are still food insecure, and even that orange band, look at how many people in Latin America are still food insecure. And when you look at the trends over time in panel B below, what you see is that in sub-Saharan Africa, unfortunately, the trend is not really declining. If we are going to be making progress, it's going to be largely in Asia, in both East Asia, which is the brown line, as well as in South Asia. So there's some hope and optimism there. But the real challenge is still lying in sub-Saharan Africa. And so what do we do with all of this data and information? First, I just can't emphasize enough Vimlendra's opening point that this is a long journey. These are not trends that can be suddenly changed. We won't be able to declare success overnight. I think we have to take a much more explicit and intentional spatial approach. FAO has now given us the mechanism not to just talk about countries, but actually talk about specific sub-regions. That's going to be very important, both for the effectiveness of our root cause interventions, as well as our ability to target more efficiently emergency food assistance. I think in this time of COVID, it's actually quite important to keep a focus on rural areas. COVID has, unfortunately, really hit cities, urban areas, more densely populated areas much harder. And so the natural swing of attention by policymakers has gone towards those areas. But we have to recognize, of course, COVID is also now rising in rural areas. But I think that there is some real work to be done to keep a focus of policy attention in the development space on rural areas. There is a real risk that attention will swing to urban areas. There's so much talk about the recovery from COVID as needing to be a build back better, in the words of Secretary General Guterres. And that's exactly right. And now the case that needs to be made is that sustainable agriculture is actually a key foundation, a key component of Build Back Better. And it's that sustainability portion of agriculture that needs to be emphasized in today's world, where everyone is looking for a new model which links many of these issues of climate, inclusivity, and economic prosperity together. And that's exactly the kind of the sweet spot and the integration that organizations like FAO are working on. And of course, we must make use of many of the new technologies that are coming on board that really are the source of the optimism that some people, including myself, have, that we can actually do something about these rather dismal looking trends that I showed you earlier on. It is going to be through technology that we'll be able to do something. And so let me just close by saying, well, what can we do? Here's a little foretaste of what we, as a very small nonprofit World Data Lab, can do as our contribution. We're trying to put all of this data onto something that we're calling the World Hunger Clock. Thanks to our collaboration with FAO, we'll be able to model it. You'll be able to see for every subnational region in the world exactly what is the percent of food insecure people at different levels, moderate to severe, severe food insecurity. Hopefully we'll put up stunting data, we'll break it down, rural, urban. We'll try to disaggregate by age so that you can also do that. So just much more information, more granular information that hopefully will be useful both for awareness raising as well as for being able to help policymakers hone in on exactly where they need to intervene if they're going to address the issues of the most food insecure people on this planet. So thank you all for your attention, and thank you particularly to FAO and to all the people in FAO for the work that you do on a daily basis to try to make our world a little bit less food insecure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Homi. I think you've given us lots of food for thought for our forthcoming discussion as well. And also, I think the food insecurity experience scale indeed rightfully gets all the acclamation it deserves. Thank you also for reminding us that we have to think about the underlying causes and drivers of food insecurity, which, if you have followed the latest reports of FAO and other UN agencies, are extreme weather events, conflict, and economic recession. And it seems like we're facing all three at the moment. And also thank you for reminding us that if we stay on the current course, by 2030, there still might be 830 million people hungry, the majority of them actually in sub-Saharan Africa. But thank you also for sharing your optimism and your solutions. I think that's exactly what we need on this occasion, also some sort of energy, optimism, and thinking about solutions. But now we really want to give our high-level speakers a chance to react to Homi's presentation. So I would like to invite Ambassador Bugailiskis from Canada, then Ambassador Kip Tom from the United States, and our Deputy Director General Beth Bechdol to briefly post a question, comment, or reaction to Homi, starting with Ambassador Bugailiskis.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank you, Florian, for chairing the session, to Sharon Bemlendra, and for all the guests that we're going to be having on the show. I would actually call it a show today. I'm really happy, particularly as chair of the group of Friends of Indigenous Peoples, to see a great Indigenous representation today too. But most of all, I want to thank Dr. Kharas for this very sobering report. The numbers are could be overwhelming, but I'm glad, as you noted, Florian, that he ends on a very high note, which is the fact that there is a possibility through technology and innovation. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Kharas. In your most recent book, Leave No One Behind, From Summits to Solutions, we're obviously very interested in the solutions as we move forward to the summit on food systems, food security systems. And I wanted to ask you, you state that in order to meet 2030 goals, it's increasingly clear that the new approaches are needed globally, nationally, and locally to accelerate implementation, and they will require a period of innovation and experimentation. So I wanted to ask you if you could speak a little bit about your hopes that the Food Security Summit, System Summit may provide as an opportunity to really innovate and what that will take with regards to implementation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I mean, you know, there's just so much innovation in business models. I think all of us know that for many of the principal crops in sub-Saharan Africa in particular, productivity is so low, smallholder productivity is so low, the use of modern seeds, the use of fertilizer, no access to power, very little irrigation. I mean, some of the tried and true, you know, technologies for agriculture and indeed for livestock, cold storage, even very simple things like, you know, having real prices that are relevant to the subcontinent. Many farmers in Africa still rely on looking at, you know, the price of products in New York. Well, that's not terribly useful in terms of it's some information, but it's not that great information. We need commodity exchanges in Africa. Africa's got this particular issue of women farmers and the discrimination and the biases that they face in terms of access to credit and extension services, the expansion of extension agents. Much of this might sound sort of familiar, but I think that actually there are so many new technologies and techniques. I mean, we now have farmers in some places who are literally taking pictures of crops and being able to send them to an extension service who can tell them exactly, this is you need to apply more fertilizer, you need to apply this pesticide, this is what's happening to your crop, better weather forecasting is on the horizon. We're using now satellite imagery to be able to at least identify what's happening with smallholder farms and with yields, and we're finding that the data and the information that's coming from that doesn't always coincide with what official government surveys might look like. And so we don't even, we don't necessarily know which is the more reliable estimate. There have been cases where, people, they go out, they look at a field and they go, yeah, well, I think the yield is kind of this. Okay, these are very seasoned, experienced professionals, but it's still a judgment call. And with satellite imagery, we're able to have much, much more precision. And another huge innovation that I hope is around the corner is that in rural areas, these are really the people who are the guardians of the health of the soil, of the forests, of the rural spaces of the world. And we have to recognize and have platforms that will allow them to actually monetize the services that they are providing to all of the rest of us in keeping our planet healthy. And so if we can introduce new mechanisms for so-called eco-services, and I believe that there are now technologies that will allow us to do that, that could provide an enormous new market-led boost for rural economies around the world. So there's a lot that's happening in the sphere of innovation, whether it's innovation in business models, innovation in real technologies, innovation in the deployment of human capital. I think that hopefully in 10 years' time, we'll see a very different kind of agriculture and rural development in many places across the world.
Thank you very much for that considered reply, for that optimism. And I guess the main point is that we need to scale up in a big way.
Exactly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let me now hand the floor for Ambassador Kip Tom for his reaction.
Well, thank you. I'm certainly delighted to be a part of the group conversation this afternoon and morning, I guess, back in the East Coast. But drawing on Senior Fellows Kharas's remarks this morning, I'd like to offer some thoughts about food security and nutrition in the context of the ongoing global pandemic. And as Mr. Kharas noted, we live in a world where we produce enough food to feed everyone, yet hundreds of millions in 55 different countries are already facing crisis level malnutrition even before the COVID-19 pandemic. So the current crisis could push 130 million more towards starvation by the end of 2020. So I think it's time we really take a solid look in figuring out how we can marshal all the global resources quickly and effectively. And secondly, we can use data, as he suggests, in innovative ways to help address the serious global challenges. And third, with the pandemic and the pest outbreaks we have across Africa and the Middle East and going into Southeast Asia as examples, they demonstrate to our leaders and our public around the globe that the essential need to build back better and deepen capabilities and increase resilience is critically important. So this is why, as a farmer, when I look at this, I see the necessity of ensuring smallholder farmers and all the members of the food value chain have access to all the tools available to prove productivity. This includes the financial tools some of us have talked about earlier, but these data tools are extremely essential to make sure we're successful. It's the means of giving everybody access to the different technologies and innovations and the science-based best practices already being used in the United States and other places around the world. And it helps us build on the 3 pillars of sustainability: social, economic, and environmental. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Tom. Now, let me hand the floor to Deputy Director General Beth Bechdol for her reaction.
Thank you very much, Florian. Thank you, ambassadors, and all of you for organizing today's event. And for those of you who are attending it, it's a real pleasure to be a part of this really outstanding program. And thank you, Mr. Kharas, for an outstanding presentation. I sort of feel that my colleague, our chief economist, Maximo Torrero, should be sitting here in my stead, so you could have a very detailed discussion about the data and the research that you've been conducting. But I'm really pleased to see the progress that the World Data Lab and the World Hunger Clock are making. And we're pleased at the collaboration and the work together. I too recognize the importance of continuing to accelerate our work around data, our work around mapping. Obviously, the connections between the World Hunger Clock and the Data Lab to our own FAO hand-in-hand initiative are critically important as we think about continued refinement of our own resources, our own data, and also our own understanding of what is actually taking place in these countries. I think we all can agree that solutions and needs are not a one-size-fits-all sentiment, and we need to be mindful as we assess and we find these kinds of solutions. As I think about sort of FAO's contribution to this overall challenge that we're facing, I think about it perhaps in three sort of key areas of experience and of expertise and of delivery. First, in data and knowledge, as we really think about, again, the assets and the capacities here at FAO. Much of what you've talked about, Mr. Kharas, sort of exemplifies that, and I think showcases that experience and that knowledge and know-how. I think we also are seen often as a real leader in the technical solutions that can be brought to bear, the kinds of innovations that both ambassadors have referenced and that you too have referenced in your response. Those kinds of new and unique solutions and tools, I think, are something that we all need to continue to focus on and push boundaries on to make sure that we make an entire suite of innovations and cutting edge technologies available to those who need them most. And the third area that I think I would emphasize, which is probably the area for me personally here at FAO, because of the work and the divisions that I oversee that is critically important, is partnerships. Partnerships and outreach. And when I talk about partnerships, I really start thinking about transformational types of partnerships. And in fact, I really advocate that you add that phrase perhaps to that last slide about what's needed in terms of reaching this goal and bringing all of our resources together, right alongside innovation, the focus on rural areas, the focus on sustainable food systems. But transformational and new types of coordinated partnerships, I think, is another call to action for many of us. And so I guess to close, I'd pose that as perhaps a question to you of any insights that you might be able to provide us about the kinds of partnerships and the kinds of coordinated activity that you think could be brought to bear that would only serve to accelerate our global efforts to achieve SDG 2. Thanks, and over to you.
Thank you, Beth. Let me briefly give the floor to Homi to react to both Ambassador Kip Tom and Beth Bechdol.
Well, thank you. I think that, you know, when we think about the way in which we need to try to manage our interventions, it is quite valuable to think about the global, national, and local levels separately. And Ambassador Tom talked about the you know, the really urgent need at the global level to make sure that adequate resources are provided, that there's the right kind of capabilities to be able to provide technical assistance to people who need that. That's one type of partnership. The national level, I feel, is an area where there is the most experience over time. That's really where FAO and other international organizations have done the majority of their work, is in partnership with national governments And so there, I think the kinds of partnerships are reasonably well established. We have quite good experience with how to do it. And what I think is now really quite exciting, and which is new and which is enabled by new data and new technologies, are partnerships at the local level. And that's also, a place where FAO, other agencies, including IFAD with smallholders, have been, taking the lead. But it's a very different kind of much more implementation-focused partnership. And it's really when you get all of those three working together that you end up with, what Ambassador Bechdol, reminded me here is the absolute key, which is how do we take this to scale? You can't take things to scale just by working at the grassroots level. You can't take things to scale just by trying to do things at a national level. And you certainly can't take things to scale just by, talking together in the UN or FAO headquarters and, trying to get some kind of global agreements. But when all of those three really line up, I think we can do wonders. And so that's my kind of, my plea to everyone. Partnerships are extremely difficult to maintain. They're expensive, they're messy, the results aren't always very clear, but they're also indispensable. And so I would just say we need to, continue to push on as best we can with that, but always keeping the data there and saying, are we making fast enough progress? And if the answer to that is no, then we've got to do something differently. So, and that's where the innovation, the experimentation really comes in. And I'm so hopeful that the 2021 summit can actually launch a process of innovation and experimentation, but based in this very practical thing of let's follow the data and let's agree that if things aren't working at the pace we think, we'll continue to adopt and change until we find a model that does work. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Homi, for your for delivering the first ever inaugural World Food Day lecture. As Van Lender was mentioning, we hope to make this a series that will happen every year to kick us off with a fresh perspective. And we're also very excited to hear more from both ambassadors and our Deputy Director General later in the program, where we'll look into the future and the road to 2030. So thank you, Homi. And talking about the power and the importance of partnerships, we're now excited to move to a second segment of our event, where we really want to showcase some of our key partners in the US and Canada, the fantastic work that they do, and we will, and some of the World Food Day activities specifically. So not only will we hear an announcement of the winners of the World Food Day Poetry Competition, we will also learn about an Indigenous cookbook that was a collaboration on World Food Day. We will hear about the power of storytelling and two voices from two food heroes from our region. So let us start with the poetry competition. So that's a collaboration between FAO North America and Poetry X Hunger, as well as the Capital Area Food Bank, who have really teamed up to have this World Food Day Poetry Competition and mobilize hearts and minds for the fight against hunger and malnutrition. So it's my pleasure to now introduce Hiram LaRue, who has not only had a distinguished career at the USDA International Institute for Food and Agriculture, but is also a decorated poet. And also RNR, who is the winner of the 2018 World Food Day Poetry Contest, based out of Arlington, Virginia. So thank you for being with us. Over to you, Hiram and Aaron.
Thank you so much, Florian. The FAO Liaison Office for North America with Dr. Sharon, Tom Pesic, Florian Doerr, and many other fine staff members on that team continue to make really a huge difference to the anti-hunger cause. Their leadership has included really amazingly innovative approaches. One example of their creativity is this. For the third year in a row, they have partnered with Poetry X Hunger to sponsor the World Food Day Poetry Competition, which is helping to rouse poets to the anti-hunger cause. This year, the Capital Area Food Bank also joined with us in offering the competition, and Split This Rock, as always, provided important help as well. The competition is offered with a singular focus in mind, to encourage poets to speak back to hunger. This year, the winning poems and many of the entries do just that. And we are so proud of all of those poets who are joining the effort to reach hearts and minds as we all focus on ending hunger locally, regionally, and globally. Aaron R., the winner of the 2018 poetry competition, and this year's Poet in Residence at the Capital Area Food Bank, will announce the winners. I'll turn it over to you, Aaron. Thanks.
Thank you, Harold. And again, thank you for all the participants who participated this year. Special thanks to this year's judges, Jesse Alexander and Cheryl Morden. This year's honorable mention winners are Arisa V. Williams for Book Bag Store, Donald Illick for Bounty, Joy, Sister Joy Matthews Alford for Did They Know. The third, second, and first place winners will be given a cash prize and a certificate. The third place winner is Sanu P. Shandy for Do the Math Spring 2020 Quarantine Edition. Second place, Methany Elgani for Grow, Nourish, Sustain Together. And this year's first place winner, who will be sharing his poem with us today, whose poem the judges identified as being a human portrait of the struggle to provide an adequate diet for a family, and as a poem that has a heart and is a witness to hunger, Brian Donnell James for Testimony. Congratulations, Brian, and please share your poem with us.
Thank you so much. My name is Brian Donald James, and I am absolutely overwhelmed with this blessing. And I will get straight to the piece, which is entitled Testimony. I was a teenage father then, with little money. My wife and I had saved our lunch so that our son could eat, and we went without a meal that day. As night approached, we hoped that he would sleep until morning. And with every twist and turn he made, my anxiety rose and fell. But as toddlers do, he rose hungry, rubbing circles on his belly. He was trying to be a big boy, trying to control the desperation that I saw in his eyes. I nodded to my wife and gathered change from everywhere, anywhere, between cushions and under couches, closets, desk, cabinet drawers, and I was off to shop with newly found pocket change. Enough for some instant noodles, loafed bread, and peanut butter. As I counted out the change, the people in line smirked and commented. The cashier and I knew that I did not have enough. My eyes swelled, and I tried to control my desperation. She smiled and said, "Well, that's just enough." I bagged my food and I left. Walking back to our little apartment, I will never forget that feeling. emotion overcame me. Not embarrassment or shame, just thankfulness, just love. I'll do anything for my boy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, for this touching poem and the hardship that it can involve feeding loved ones. And indeed, I think it emphasized that food is life and food can be love. It can be an expression of love, which is a good reminder on World Food Day. If you want to read Brian's poem again and also the other winners and honorable mentions, please visit the Poetry Ex Hunger website and the FAO North America website. We will also put a link in the chat box for your referral, so you can read all the poems, and please feel free to reach out should you be interested in opening an event or closing an event with poetry to really mobilize not just minds, but also hearts. Thank you so much, Brian. So now we will move from the poetry contest to another exciting collaboration, which we have with Slow Food USA and Slow Food Turtle Island Association, which produced a collection of 14 recipes from renowned chefs, indigenous chefs from all over North America. It's now my pleasure to introduce Anna Mulé, who's Executive Director of Slow Food USA. She has a background in journalism and loves the intersection of food and culture and the rich diversity of the slow food community. I'm also honored to introduce Denisa Livingston, who is a food justice organizer of the Diné Community Advocacy Alliance, Slow Food International Indigenous Councilor for the Global North, Ashoka Fellow, Steering Committee member of the Slow Food Turtle Island Association, and a social entrepreneur. Thank you so much, and over to you, Anna and Denisa.
Thank you, Florian. It's good to see everyone here, and thank you, Brian, for that really beautiful poem. I love the focus on partnerships here, you know, how we must bring together the grassroots with the national, with the multinational institutions. Slow food is a grassroots movement in over 160 countries with about 100 local chapters here in the US. While different slow food communities focus on different parts of the food system, from sustainable fish to school gardens to food policy, our common goal is good, clean, and fair food for all. We see food as a common language that helps us build relationships across cultures, ecosystems, and traditions. And so it was a true honor to work with FAO on recipes from Turtle Island. With this collection of 14 delicious and nutritious recipes from Indigenous chefs, we are centering Indigenous perspectives and foodways in the path to heal our country. We are uniting joy with these super tasty recipes and the pursuit of justice. The featured chefs are Nephi Craig, Vincent Medina and Louis Trevino, Loretta Oden, Sean Sherman, Elena Terry, Crystal Wapipa, and Brian Yazzie. On our Slow Food Live session yesterday, the chefs talked about what inspired them with these dishes, the positive and healing energy of the places where they foraged berries, the people who helped create these foods. We are honored to partner with these chefs as they work to revive and sustain Indigenous foodways and communities with healthy and traditional foods. So on that note, let me introduce Denisa Livingston, who is a steering committee member with Slow Food Turtle Island Association and who works closely with Turtle Island leaders and her Diné Navajo Nation community in New Mexico. Denisa is a good friend, and I was so happy to work with her on this project.
I'm going to introduce myself in my Diné language. Denisa Livingston and Nisha Kilachini Nashlan Tishidina Bashichin, Ose Dene Tati Dashache, Donanish Ejatachini Dashanella, Ayasident Nasha A Tedagon will yet the Equit Adi and Nishila. So thank you for having us. It's just quite an honor and a privilege to be here. I am of the Red House People Clan, and it has been such an honor this week, as a couple of days ago here in the US, and I'm in the New Mexico part of my homelands of the Navajo Nation, Dinetka. It was Indigenous Peoples Day, and with the hashtag, we are still here. As Indigenous peoples, we are contemporary peoples as well. In this project, we are really excited about. Food brings us together. Food is what makes us whole and alive and healthy. And in my language, we say, that means healthy food is life. And as we partner and ally with Slow Food USA and FAO, we are creating authentic relationships, creating a greater public consciousness of Native sovereignty and cultural rights. And this project of the recipe book is to honor the narratives, the practices and spiritualities that are sacredly based in relationship and healing of the land, the water, and the air. And as we reclaim our traditional lifeways and foodways, and working with the chefs, they are ultimately advocating for eating and acting with intention and responsibility, not to be wasteful, to eat seasonally, to focus on strategic agriculture with the landscape with the purpose of food and not to disrupt wild food areas. To ask, why did my ancestors like this food? In particular, when tasting something bitter or something that is not accustomed to our program taste, why did our ancestors like this? To question those types of questions, to be able to create a recipe, to create a food experience like that of our ancestors. As we learn to adapt, as we go forward, the chefs advocate for courageous humility to continue to place greater value on Indigenous people's knowledge and wisdom. And as we move forward through the week and World Food Day, I'd like to also honor the film Gather. If you have a chance to watch this film, it was just recently released, and also there are virtual screenings of this beautiful film to share how Indigenous peoples on Turtle Island are moving and healing mechanisms and also reactions and also experiences to reclaim our identities through food sovereignty. Get your copy as soon as you can or connect with this film. Now, as we are in a restorative revolution at this time as Indigenous peoples, let's continue to support the resilience and joy of relevant efforts of Indigenous peoples. We need to continue to be stewards of biodiversity in our planting, on our plates, in our kitchens, and on our palettes as well, for growth, sustainability, and meaningful purpose. So I'd just like to thank you. Get your copy of the recipes of Turtle Island and enjoy that, and make a meal with your family, and bring sovereignty to your kitchen table and honor Indigenous peoples. So thank you, Ahiha.
Thank you so much, Anna and Dine, for this great collaboration, for this great cookbook. Please find a link in the chat box. Download it, try some of the recipes. I'm really looking forward to do that, and we want to encourage all of you to do the same. And there were so many points that you mentioned which really resonate with World Food Day, which is really recognizing food as what it is, biodiversity, reducing food loss and waste. There are so many calls for actions which are really relevant on this World Food Day. So thank you very much for that. We're now excited to showcase another strong collaboration which we have with the Planet Forward initiative at the George Washington University, which is really to harness the power of storytelling to move the planet forward towards sustainability. And in the past years, students from all over the US actually had the chance to travel to Rome and participate in the Committee for World Food Security, which of course is not possible this year. But I'm happy to introduce Frank Sesno to tell us about an exciting new storytelling award. And he was director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University, and is now director of strategic initiatives. Frank is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and creator of Planet Forward, a user-driven web and television project that highlights innovations in sustainability. He hosts and facilitates the Planet Forward Salon series, focusing on topics such as energy, green jobs, and food. Thank you, Frank Sesno, and over to you.
And thank you, and I do appreciate it. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm seeing several people who we saw in Rome just last year. Ambassador Tom, it's wonderful to see you again, so greetings and hello. And Penniman Sharon, who has been our wonderful collaborator and inspiring speaker at so many of our events. It's wonderful to see you on this great day too. Yes to storytelling, and we just heard that from the several previous speakers. You know, we live in an environment where we are so inundated with information, when we are so inundated with media, and we are so inundated with data. But what makes the data live what makes these things come to life and what gives people memory and response to them are the stories that we tell around them, the people we make real, the characters who are struggling to overcome and to survive, to do great things. The storytelling platform, Planet Forward, that we started some time ago, is a publishing platform for students from colleges and universities across the country and around the world. And we have now more than 5,000 stories posted there. And I think it's a mark of how this young generation feels about the issue of food, that so many of the stories that they do on their own revolve around food. Food insecurity, food deserts, food waste. They are food consumers. They're not food producers. Very few of them do that. But they connect this to their world. They connect this to their notions of sustainability. They connect this to a very powerful notion, especially now, of equity and access and ability to achieve and to create. To our partnership with Food and Agriculture Organization, we created a few years ago this partnership with FAO here in DC, a competition that we had then, and we brought several students, as mentioned, to the Committee on World Food Security. Last year we came to Rome, and in fact one of the students who traveled with us, you can see him, he's focused, or he's highlighted, featured on a piece that we just put up on PBS. If you go to Peril and Promise, if you Google Peril and Promise, Rohan Agrawal, he's a student from India, he's studying in Mississippi now, and for him, learning about food, coming to the conference, meeting with the First Lady of Colombia as he did and interviewing her, and doing stories changed his whole approach to his studies and what he wants to do, because it connected him with the narratives. That's power of turning experience into narrative, into story. And at the end of the interview I was doing with him, I said, well, Rohan, what is your goal for yourself in your life? And he said, well, maybe one day I will be Prime Minister of India. So I said, I'm following you, I'm with you, and feed the world. He's very committed to food. What we're doing now is we've got a partnership with FAO, and it's a storytelling contest. The deadline for people submitting stories is the 16th. They have to provide a story in any context that they want. They can do a written piece, 800 to 1,000 words. They can do a podcast, 3 to 15 minutes. Just tell a story about food and what they're doing, what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, what they want to change. We'll have prizes, first, second, and third, $300, $200, and $100. So it won't make them rich, but it will give them a sense of accomplishment and a sense of recognition. And then we will feature those stories on the planetforward.org platform. You will see it here as well. What is this power of storytelling as I see it? I've been a storyteller all my life. It is first learning. You as the storyteller must learn the issue and your character well enough to capture it. Secondly, to give it a shape, to make it relatable. I like to say that stories are about compelling characters, overcoming obstacles to achieve a worthy outcome. That's a great story. And that is the story of the planet right now and the story of food. And that's what these students are doing. So I look forward very much to them and all the submitted works. We will announce the winners on October 30th. The deadline is the 16th. So if you know anybody, please encourage them to do that. But I just want to say before I leave, I want to thank all of you and say what a pleasure it is to be here with you. The work that everybody here is doing is about a great story. It is about the compelling characters is everybody on this planet. The obstacles are well known, and the worthy outcome is a sustainable, healthy place where people can live and thrive and prosper. And so thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I look forward to doing more. Vimlendra, I look forward to featuring you at our Planet Forward Summit very soon. And happy Food Day. Much luck and success.
Thank you so much, Frank, for these inspiring words. And indeed, I think there's really nothing that's not fitting into storytelling. Even the way we learn and process information, most of it is through stories, actually. So
could I say one more thing? I just want to pass this. I'm sorry, I don't mean to barge in and blow up you. Congressman Jim McGovern, very committed in this country to food, told a story to us about how he went across the country and met with people, low-income people who were struggling. Every time he went in and met with them, he took a paper plate and he would write or have them write on their paper plate something about that experience. And then he went to the floor of the United States Congress and he read those stories back. Think about that. Sorry.
No, thank you so much. It's always great to hear the power of storytelling. So as Frank was mentioning, there's still 2 days to enter the contest. Make sure to check out the Planet Forward website. And we're really looking forward to hear these inspiring stories from students and to hear about the winners. We will now come to another segment of our program, which really celebrates food heroes. So again, one big focus of this year's World Food Day is to recognize all the people from farm to fork, the farmers, the workers, who keep supply chains going no matter what, despite the pandemic, make sure that food arrives on our plates. And it's a good reminder that behind our food, there's always somebody who produces, plants, harvests, and transports our food. So World Food Day is really an opportunity to thank our food heroes. And we want to start with a video of the global food heroes that was prepared by our headquarters and will be projected on the Colosseum in Rome on Friday. Today, we're also really honored and thrilled to have two of the food heroes you saw in this video with us, from whom we will hear in a second. Now I'm pleased to introduce Naima Penniman, who is a multidimensional artist and also program director at the Soulfire Farm in the United States, where she supports the next generation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color with land-based education and mobilizing public support for food sovereignty through off-farm training programs, speaking, and facilitation. And Naima says we are being called to address some deep structural injustices in our food systems. Thank you for being with us, Naima, and over to you.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Happy Food Day and congratulations on the 75th anniversary of FAO as we chart these crucial next 75 years with a commitment to food sovereignty and justice. I'm honored to be here with you. I'm Naima Penniman. I'm the program director at Soulfire Farm. And as Black American civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamerson quote, down where we are, food is used as a political weapon. But if you have a pig in your backyard, if you have some vegetables in your garden, you can feed yourself and your family, and nobody can push you around. Fannie Lou Hamer founded Freedom Farms Cooperative in 1967. This is a community-based rural and economic development project in Sunflower County, Mississippi. And I pay homage to Fannie Lou Hamer and the many Black and Indigenous people of color ancestors and land stewards who are helping to chart our path from here. At Soul Fire Farm, we believe, like Fannie Lou Hamer, that to free ourselves, we must feed ourselves. And we are an Afro-Indigenous community farm dedicated to ending racism and seeding sovereignty in the food system. I give gratitude to our entire team and to the land that we're in partnership with every day. We are on unceded Munsee Mohican territory in upstate New York, and we're driven by a mission to feed our community while stewarding this land, also to train the next generation of farmers and activists for food justice, and to support in building the movement for food and land sovereignty. And ultimately, it's about each and every one of us getting to be fully alive. And we know life is integrally connected to good food and good land. Unfortunately, injustice and racism are baked into the foundation of the food system in our country here on Turtle Island, and this has not fundamentally changed. It's built upon land theft and genocide of Indigenous people and the exploitation of Black and brown labor. And the challenges that we see that the COVID-19 outbreak is posing to our communities are only exemplifying this need for collective food sovereignty. And we're experiencing multiple pandemics, right, of COVID, of police and state violence, of climate-fueled wildfires, of economic inequality that are amplifying existing disparities and really revealing the fault lines in industrial food system and racialized capitalism to any of us who couldn't previously ignore it. So what we're up to as solutionaries in this work, along with so many incredible BIPOC-led groups, again, first is really about feeding our community by stewarding the land. And we're here regenerating 80 acres of land through Afro-Indigenous farming and forestry practices, like agroforestry, wildcrafting, silvopasture, spiritual farming practices, to be able to produce vegetables, fruits, herbal medicine, pasture-raised poultry, honey, mushrooms, and preserves for our communities. And we share the harvest of the land with the people in our community who are most impacted by food apartheid and state violence. In the midst of the pandemic, 90% of the harvest that we grow here is going direct through doorstep delivery to community members who are living under food apartheid. And every week we pack up bushels of our harvest and take it direct to the doorsteps of 50 families, as well as to our community partners, including the Free Food Fridge Project in Albany and the Refugee Center and other food pantries. And we know the saying that to give someone a fish, they'll eat for the day, but to teach someone how to fish, they'll eat forever. And we understand that it's so important that we reclaim agency in the food system. And so we're also really committed to teaching and supporting folks in our community and learning to grow some of their own food and medicine. We have a program called Soul Fire in the City. And this year we built and supported the creation of over 40 urban gardens for households in the Capital District. And we know that in addition to systems change and policy change, home and community gardening can fill gaps in food access while really bolstering longer-term community food sovereignty. And so we brought together teams of volunteers and all the materials, lumber, compost, soil, seeds, seedlings, as well as the guidance to support our neighbors in growing their own food and medicine. And we also welcome people to our farm for trainings. We have an Afro-Indigenous farming immersion where folks come for a week to live and learn with us. And we're also working to heal our relationship to land, knowing that there's so much trauma that we've inherited based on land having been stolen from us or our peoples or being stolen from the land. And this is an important step in reclaiming leadership as farmers and food justice organizers in our communities to heal this relationship to the earth. And we're also working to really build the movement for food and land sovereignty. We're collaborating on both regional, national, and international levels through food justice networks to advance reparations and rematriation, as well as to work on campaigns for farmer survival and dignity. We publish articles and books, facilitate workshops for activists, and share tangible methods for dismantling racism in the food system. And I want to invite you all to also be inspired by the number of actions and interventions that we can each take to help to heal our broken food system. We've created a platform of action steps that was sourced from hundreds of conversations from Black and Indigenous land stewards, farmers, farm workers, and community members to share ways that we can intervene on multiple levels to help to heal the food system. So I'll place the link to that resource in the chat. And I want to just close by saying that I know with the struggle that we're up against to be able to feed our communities in a world ravaged by inequity, climate disaster, and chaos, that it really takes all of us working and intervening on multiple levels to be able to reclaim our birthright to good food and good lands. And I believe that we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naima, for all your passion. It sounds like we heard from Brian that food is love. We've heard from Dine that food is health, and it sounds like you are saying food is power also. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our second World Food Hero, who is Lori Nikkel, CEO of Canada's largest food rescue organization, Second Harvest. In her role, she ensures that 150 million pounds of nutritious foods like dairy, protein, and produce are diverted to landfills to non-profit organizations each year to feed hungry people. And Lori says there's enough food to feed everybody. It's just a matter of making that connection. Thank you so much, Lori, also for being with us, and over to you.
Good morning. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am and Second Harvest are to be identified by the FAO as the food hero for Canada. So as you mentioned, Second Harvest, we are Canada's largest food rescue organization, which means we have this dual mission of no waste and no hunger. We rescue and distribute perishable and nutrient-dense food, primarily produce, dairy, and protein. And that is because these are the foods that are hardest to access if you're low income. And in Canada, although it's hard to believe, 1 in 7 people are experiencing food insecurity right now. On top of that, as a result of rescuing this food, we're keeping it out of landfill and diverting the harmful greenhouse gases from our environment. What makes us unique is we have an opt-in model. So you can access food, which is critical to ensure that everyone can get the food that they need, when they need it, and in the way that they need it. And at the onset of the COVID pandemic, the first thing we did was create the Food Rescue Canadian Alliance. And this was a transformational partnership that representation from government, from industry, from charity, and from the Indigenous community. And as a result of that, the federal government created a $50 million surplus food rescue program to facilitate the purchase and distribution of all that excess food that was a result of this pandemic. Globally, we work with like-minded organizations. We share best practices, research, and international contacts. We also provide training and education, because we too believe that you have to teach a person to fish. And so we do that with food safety, nutrition, food waste reduction, and we provide certification. So I think everybody's probably familiar with food rescue, but if not, essentially all it is across the supply chain, there's all kinds of surplus food, extra food, unsold food. So we work from farmer to retail, distribution center, restaurants to capture that surplus food and make sure it gets to charities and nonprofits serving people. And we do this in a myriad of ways. We have a couple of distribution centers. We have a fleet of trucks. We have lots of third-party logistics partners. And we have a technology called foodrescue.ca, which is Canada's matchmaking app that we developed to connect a local food business with a local charity so that food could stay local and support the people in those communities. As well, we know that in Canada and globally, there's more than enough food to feed everybody. We don't have a food shortage problem. We have a food systems problem. And at Second Harvest, we are working to disrupt the food system because it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the people and it doesn't work for our planet. Northern communities, women, people of color, and youth are disproportionately impacted by food insecurity. And we believe it's critical for us to meet people where they are and provide food in a safe space where people feel welcome and where they don't have to prove that they are low income to access the food. In Canada, we have 60,000 charities across the country that provide food to people. There is more than enough food for everyone. In fact, in Canada, 58% of all the food produced for Canadians is lost or wasted. So essentially, we waste more food than we produce, than we eat. And this is good food. This is right from the farmer. This is right from the manufacturer. It's enough to feed every Canadian for 5 months. So not only does this pose a threat to Canadians' ability to access food, as mentioned, food in landfill creates methane gas, and it is a significant contributor to climate change. And in Canada, we are warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world. So I am passionate, personally, because I too was a low-income single parent. And I was devastated, not knowing how I was going to feed my children and pay my rent. And what I remember most was how hopeless I felt all the time, living in constant fear. Fortunately, we were able to access food through the school nutrition program, which was universal. And that meant my child didn't have to put their hand up and say they were poor. They could eat alongside their friends that were getting the same meal. So as a good charity, my goal is to go out of business. We exist because there are fundamental flaws to our food system that we really need to fix. And World Food Day is critical because it shines a light on food and it reminds everybody, everyone, of the intrinsic value of food. Food should not be treated like a commodity with a margin of profit. Food is essential, should be valued as a life-giving sustenance it is. So at Second Harvest, our call to action is to eradicate food loss and waste and make sure every Canadian has the food they need to be healthy. And we would call on every food producer, every corporation, to consistently measure the food that they're wasting, and the government to impose targets and goals for reduction, and mandating that any kind of surplus be given to communities at no charge. Canada needs this, the world needs this, because we have to do better to support the health of the people and the health of this planet. So I want to thank the FAO so much for creating this dialogue and for putting a spotlight on food this way. You're amplifying the voices of people that are so often overlooked. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Lori, for your remarks and also all the important work you do in Canada, which indeed I think is really changing the food system. And this all ties in extremely well to this year's World Food Day, which is really also a call for global solidarity to help all populations, especially the most vulnerable, to recover from this crisis and also making food systems more resilient so they can also withstand future volatility, climate shocks. And I think what we hear over and over again is the need for affordable, healthy diets, decent livelihoods for farmers and also for food system workers. I now want to thank all of our partners in North America for this excellent overview of activities. You can find all the Food Hero stories on FAO's website if you go on the World Food Day website. And there's also a challenge for you. So the challenge is to upload a photo of your favorite dish, thanking your food hero and using the hashtags Food Heroes, and challenge some others to do the same. So this is really a way to highlight your favorite dish and all the food heroes out there. So thank you so much again for all the work we do. We will now come to the third segment of our webinar, which is really looking ahead. So what needs to happen that we achieve maybe zero hunger, sustainable agriculture by 2030? What are some of the issues that need to happen at FAO, where we would like to see the global community and FAO at 2030? So I think we have all recognized that we've come a really long journey over this last 75 years, but much remains to be done. So I'm honored again to introduce our panel for that. So first we have Alexandra Bugailiskis, who is Canada's ambassador to the Italian Republic, also permanent representative to the Rome-based UN agencies, and accredited as ambassador for the Republic of San Marino, Malta, and Albania. We also have the honor of having with us Ambassador Kip Tom, who is United States representative to the UN Food and Agriculture Organizations. And he is actually an agribusiness leader who transformed a 7th generation farm into one of the largest commodity business in the Midwestern United States, also launching international operations and deploying new technologies. And then we will hear an insider perspective from our Deputy Director General, Beth Bechdol. And in her role, she is responsible for FAO's partnerships and outreach work, including UN collaboration, resource mobilization, private sector partnerships, and South-South and triangular cooperation. So thank you again so much, and really looking forward to your remarks on where you would like to see FAO or the global community by 2030. And let me start by handing over to Ambassador Bugailiskis.
Well, thank you very much. Let me just start by saying how inspired we all are by the wonderful stories that we've heard today. This is the true human face of food. We need to understand the true human impact of food insecurity, and at the same time, the beauty that comes from a world where we have more food security. I am going to apologize in advance because you will find my statement for two reasons, a little formal, because I am an ambassador and that's what ambassadors do, but also because of the fact that we are facing a 75th anniversary. It is a really important landmark and a moment, I think, for reflection, but also, as you've noticed, Florian, we need to look forward to where we should be going. So, merci beaucoup pour m'avoir invité à cet important événement célébrant le 75e anniversaire de la FAO. I'm saying just a few words in French because I know we don't have interpretation today, but it's really important for me to remind everyone that the birth of the FAO was dans la belle ville de Québec. If I could, I should, and I would speak in one of the many Indigenous languages, because I also recognize that in Canada, the majority of us live and work on the traditional and unceded lands of Indigenous peoples. But I will go back to the history of the FAO with regards to being born in Quebec City. And in fact, one of the, I continue with the analogy, one of the midwives was in fact our former Prime Minister, Lester B. Pearson, who presided over the first conference of the FAO on October 16th, 1945. As with any good idea or an initiative, there are many godmothers and fathers, and that should that take credit for this important birth, and that includes Italy, which hosted the conference in 1905 that created the predecessor to the FAO, the International Institute of Agriculture. The IAA unfortunately became a victim of World War II. But I'm happy to say it was none other than President Franklin D. Roosevelt who actively promoted the need and vision for the FAO and managed to convene a conference in the middle of the war in 1943 in Virginia. I would also note the tenacity of the famous British Australian economist Frank McDougall, who also was an active advocate for a forum that would address hunger and malnutrition. So the establishment of the FAO almost 6 months before the end of World War II was an important sign of hope for the future. Coming out of the ashes and the devastation that left millions of refugees, millions of people homeless, and obviously millions in food insecurity. And it harkened an era of a new age of multilateralism and global brotherhood, and I would add sisterhood. It set in motion the conviction set out in Virginia 2 years earlier, which was now embraced by 44 founding nations, including Canada and the United States of America, that freedom from hunger can be achieved. And on that day, 75 years ago, Mr. Pearson exclaimed, "We at this conference know, and we have shown what science could do if harnessed to the chariot of construction." We'll come back to that point because I think, as we've heard in many of the presentations today, that technology and science need to embrace with society to really make the progress that is required, whether it is saving food or producing food. But speaking today in 2020 feels a little bit like going back to the future. While tremendous progress across many domains has been made, the unfortunate reality, as we've heard, is that over the past, particularly the past 5 years, our efforts to eliminate hunger and malnutrition by 2030 has been seriously derailed by a series of protracted conflicts, the growing impact of climate change, and now, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we look to building a road to 2030, we find ourselves faced once again with the urgent imperative to achieve freedom from want of food. The ambitious goals and targets of Agenda 2030 call for bold and transformative action by all stakeholders to realize a zero hunger world. As a global knowledge organization, the FAO has a key role to play based on its strengths, its technical expertise, its neutral convening power, its capacity to aggregate data and distill it as evidence for policymaking, measuring impact. So as we celebrate this important anniversary, we need to take stock of not only what has been achieved, but the challenges that lay ahead. And I'd just like to take a few moments to highlight a few key areas. We know that farmers are among our most innovative entrepreneurs. They are intrepid in battling the forces of nature, and I would say governments, in their quest to produce bountiful and nutritious food while maintaining the heritage of the land. And to be successful, farmers have to have access to the entire toolbox of mutually reinforcing innovative policies and technologies that can increase farm incomes, build resilient and sustainable food systems, and ensure the availability and affordability of nutritious foods for all. The FAO has a key role in supporting the development of that enabling environment that can foster that innovation while ensuring the health and safety of people, plants, and animals in the environment through its technical and standard-setting activities. The FAO needs to intensify its efforts to provide that critical, enabling, and neutral space where farmers and scientists, researchers and students can come together to discuss and debate even the most challenging topics, including the role of technology in supporting sustainable agricultural production. And as an expert organization, the FAO can play a critical role in supporting increased understanding of the complexity of sustainable agriculture and the challenging trade-offs that governments and farmers need to make in balancing the three pillars of sustainability: social, economic, and environmental. As the FAO has consistently stressed, there is no silver bullet and solutions are very context specific. I'll give you one example. Over the past 20 years in Canada, we've invested substantial resources to implementing a robust no-till agriculture approach, which has led to significant improvements in soil health and carbon sequestration. However, we also recognize that this technique and its benefits can vary depending on climate and geography. In short, we recognize that there is no one size that fits all for all situations and needs. So in order to have long-lasting impact, innovative solutions must also promote greater equality by creating more inclusive opportunities for poor and marginalized populations. This means women and girls particularly. They need to be enabled to play a center role in the design, testing, and adoption of agricultural solutions and to become real partners as innovators. This is the heart of Canada's feminist international assistance policy. It also means that we need to address and harness the knowledge of Indigenous peoples and ensure that they have full opportunity to participate in the creation of sustainable and productive agricultural solutions as important knowledge holders and guardians of biodiversity. And we must also look to the future by ensuring that we are encouraging, training, and enabling our youth to drive this innovative agenda. They need to see the opportunities that lie in contributing to productive, income-generating, and sustainable agriculture in their countries. And finally, I need to underline the importance of supply chains. Having a predictable, rules-based trading system that helps move food from areas of abundance to areas of scarcity and increases resilience to shocks. Just as importantly, when market access is predictable, farmers and processors have the confidence to invest in themselves and to attract outside investment, which supports more efficient production and a more resilient food supply. At this year's State of Agriculture Commodity Markets report shows participation in global value chains is often a key driver of innovation. It leads to technology and knowledge spillover and increases productivity and employment opportunities and incomes. So in conclusion, I'd like to say the 2021 Food Systems Summit will provide us with a unique and powerful opportunity to review, to reform, and to recover from the COVID-19 crisis and to build back better through a renewed global commitment to creating resilient, sustainable, and equitable food systems. To meet that challenge, we need to mobilize the forces for change by enabling and empowering, particularly women and youth, to fully engage. And we will need to build those bridges between farmers and researchers and business so that innovative processes can be scaled up, provide context-specific solutions. And that means we need to ensure that the FAO is fully equipped to meet the challenges of the 21st century, that it has the resources and the focus needed to strengthen and disseminate its critical role in providing science-based data and evidence-based policy advice in the whole range of sectors from agriculture to fisheries and forests. So thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Bugailiskis, and for your important guidance on the way forward and your leadership in this area. It's now my honor to hand over to Ambassador Kip Tom.
Well, thank you. Appreciate to have a few moments of time left in this event. I'll start out by saying that the people that are on this call, you can sense the passion. They have a passion to make sure that they play a role in making sure we have a more food secure world in the future. I hear about the diversity that's on the call today that's in this event. It's everywhere from small farmers to large farmers, those who adapt some of the modern innovations to those that go with more of a different approach that's used in the past that many customers like to have today. So it takes all forms of agriculture. It takes the diversity, but most importantly, it takes passion. And I think this is where we really have our goals to work together, especially as we approach 2030, a little bit over 9.5 years from now. I hope we can get to that point and say, we've done it. And we can say that together. We've achieved SDG 2 and ended hunger. We've won the global fight against malnutrition and undernourishment. It is going to take a lot of work and global focus to get there though. And right now, we are not on track to achieve this by 2030. But there's still time to significantly accelerate our progress. And next year's Food Systems Summit provides us a wonderful opportunity to galvanize action and spur creative thinking towards transforming food systems innovatively and sustainably. So what do we need to do to get there? I believe at the Food and Agriculture Organization, their framework must be flexible and innovative to be responsive to unforeseen risk while also preserving FAO's core mandate and its really value add. It's normative and it's standard setting work, data analysis, policy dialogue, and technical cooperation that sets its apart from other international organizations. So FAO needs to focus on matching its strategy with talent, especially in its plant health and food safety pillars, the foundation for food security. And the organization needs to become increasingly nimble, since we see that increasingly cross-cutting issues like climate, gender, and even good governance have implication on food security. So the United States is supportive of FAO's new focus on innovations, including biotech and its prioritization of better partnering with the private sector. As a farmer myself, I want to see a future where farmers in every element of the food value chain, from producers to distributors to consumers, has access to choices. So to achieve true and lasting food security, we need improved access to technology, and we need to embrace the potential for agricultural innovations to meet growing global demand while reducing agriculture's environmental footprint. And we need to ensure that the next generation of farmers aren't just working to survive, but working to grow and thrive. This will attract youth. Agriculture needs to be the means to more economic and social opportunities, a way to contribute to household, community, and national well-being. This will also depend upon improved coordination amongst the Rome-based agencies, while improving coordination with the UN actors, civil society, the private sector, and other partners. So looking ahead, I see tremendous opportunities for the FAO, for the United States to contribute meaningfully, drawing on our own agriculture and trade expertise, for farmers to have their voice heard at the policy table, for the private sector to become more engaged, and for all of us collectively as we head into next year's Food System Summit to lay the groundwork for resilient, sustainable agriculture and food systems and push the research-backed scientific solutions that can realistically meet the food security challenges of the future. In 2030, I know we would all like to look back and say, we did it. Let's work together and achieve these goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Tom, for your remarks and your leadership. And who better to now close us off and some insights than Beth Bechdol, our Deputy Director General. Thank you, Beth, and over to you.
Thank you, Florian, and thank you to all of you who have participated in this outstanding and such an inspiring session. I will just say to you, I think this is exactly what I needed at the end of the day in the middle of a very busy week. You brought a lot of smiles and a lot of emotional moments here listening to so many of you, and your heartfelt commitment and passion to the work that we all collectively are doing around food and agriculture and the support of all of the people who are a part of it. I too had some formal remarks. I am actually going to set those aside in, I think, the interest of time, and also to probably speak a little bit more candidly and a little bit more freely, and maybe even from the heart with all of you, as opposed to something maybe a little more prepared. I just want to say that first, I want to congratulate all of the food heroes. The two stories that were presented today were absolutely incredible, very impactful, and the kinds of stories that oftentimes when we get caught in the technical aspects of all of this work that we're all doing, whether it's about particular programs or whether it's implementation of projects or other launches of key initiatives, your stories are reminders to me of why we're doing what we're doing. And that's really powerful, and you should be commended for that in a very important way. I also would just want to say that we should also never lose sight that each and every one of us, I think, is a food hero, and each and every one of us has a food story. I think about my own food heroes in my life, you know, my dad and my grandfather who worked tirelessly to, you know, put economically viable, you know, farm operation together in the Midwest, really thinking about providing for their families, about preserving the heritage of our community, the resources of the land and the water and the soil and the other natural elements around us. You have brought a lot of that coming right back into, I think, front of mind for so many of us. I also want to thank everyone today who is celebrating World Food Day with us, and most importantly, the 75th anniversary and birthday celebrations for us at FAO. When you hit a milestone like this, the 75th anniversary, oftentimes you start thinking about the next 75 years. And I really wish that we were in some ways talking about, you know, achievements and goals that far off into the future. But unfortunately, as we've all heard today, the close-up, you know, set of circumstances that are right in front of us aren't as optimistic and aren't as rosy as we'd all like. And so it is incredibly important that while we do think about another long period of time ahead of us, the marathon, so to speak, we also think about these next few years. 10 years is a short period of time. It will be here and gone before we know it. And we have a considerable amount of work to do, and it can oftentimes be daunting. But I can tell you that here at FAO, for all of the work that both ambassadors have shared, I can't say enough to echo their direction and their mandates and their vision for what FAO needs to continue to do to support all of us, to be able to support the kinds of sustainable food and agricultural systems that are very much needed around the world. But our aspiration is to very simply leave no one behind, no one. The food systems of the future need to be sustainable, they need to be inclusive, and they need to be resilient. And our Director General speaks often about the aspirations that we have here. He calls them the 4 Bs, and they are better production, better nutrition, a better environment that ultimately leads to a better life for all of us. And I think that those guiding principles are what we all need to keep our eye on. All of the directions, all of the opportunities that have been presented are certainly of highest priority for us here at FAO as we think about the next 10 years and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's going to take tenacity, it's going to take commitment, it's going to take passion, and it's going to take each and every one of us. And Florian, today's program absolutely emphasized and showcased that very point. And I would just encourage all of you to keep using your voices, stay connected, stay committed to our work, and really continue to be the best partner to us here at FAO that you can be, because we need you. So thanks very much for the outstanding program today and for bringing your voices to this conversation and being a part of such an important week. Happy World Food Day, and congratulations to all of the food heroes for everything that you've done to get to this point with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth, for this great closing. And let me also thank one more time all of our fantastic speakers, Homi Kharas, Ambassador Bugailiskis, Ambassador Kip Tom, Beth Bechdol, Hiram LaRue, Aaron R., Anna Mulé, Denisa Livingston, Frank Sesno, Naima Penniman, Lori Nikkel, Wimlenda Sharan, and of course our winning poet for their remarks today. We of course cannot end this meeting without recognizing one more time, as Ambassador Bugailiskis mentioned, the deep roots that FAO has in North America. And as you mentioned, FAO was conceived in Hot Springs, Virginia in 1943 and established in 1945 in Quebec, Canada. And until today, the US and Canada remain key resource partners and really champions for FAO, for which we are very grateful and want to mention on this date also our gratefulness for your leadership and for your support for FAO. Now, let me finish off with some quick announcements. We want to invite all of you to a World Food Prize site event tomorrow and building more sustainable food systems, which will also feature World Food Prize laureate Dr. Ratan Lal tomorrow. And then on Friday, World Food Day itself, we will host a Twitter chat with Food Tank, where we encourage all of you to join and share your voices and answers. Our director will also participate in the Smithsonian Food History Weekend, to which we encourage you to register. And of course, we also want to invite all of you to tune in for the global ceremony that will be happening in Rome, starting at 8 a.m. Eastern time. We will see also keynote lectures, the heads of the Rome-based agencies, and the video mapping on the Colosseum. So to close out, let me just say, we heard today that food is life, food is love, food is power, food is health, and food is always embedded in the story that needs to be told. We've heard that partnerships, technology, innovation, and science are absolutely key to build back better, and that all of us have a role to play, so let's work together. With that, thank you so much again for joining us today. Happy World Food Day, and all the best to all of you. Stay safe and stay healthy.